Yeah, hi there. These comments, I'm going to use your initials HS, and I am Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for all of your lessons at the 7-step system to pass a TOEFL IBT. And I'm going to go ahead and save and then open your file. So as you know, I am the online TOEFL course teacher for the online course, the 7-step system to pass a TOEFL IBT. And let's take a look at your response to the integrated speaking practice test.
Around 11 o'clock, Phillips received a warning from California.
Now wait a minute. Around 11 o'clock, time out. You don't want to start with a detail. You want to start with what's called a generalization. The generalization comes from the question itself. So if you look at the question, this helps you frame your response. That way you have a better organization. So if you go back to the video and you look at the question, it says, using examples from the lecture, explain the most significant or important events surrounding the sinking of the Titanic. So if you restate that and you put that in the beginning, you can say something like this. According to the lecture, there were several important events which caused the Titanic to sink. If you start off like that, then you say, well, the first important event is, then another important event is, a third one, a fourth one, and so on. So that way you have a little bit better organization. So remember that the way information works in academic writing and academic speaking, we typically start with a generalization first, and then we move to the more specific information after that. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's keep going. So that would be my suggestion based on the first 4 seconds of your response.
Around 11 o'clock, Phillips received a warning from California stating a ship was blocked by ice. Phillips signaled back for the California shut up. Then the operator in California shut off his receiver and went to bed. Fleet and Lee.
Now, as you say that, this is important. So why does this matter in terms of the question? Well, this seems to be important. This is an important issue or event because if the Titanic had not ignored those warnings, if they had stopped for the night or at least slowed down, maybe they would not have hit the iceberg. So you want to make sure you take this idea and you connect it back to the purpose of the speaking task, which is what caused the ship to sink. So that way we can see how the ideas that you're saying here, we can see how they connect back to the purpose of the speaking.
Are stood in the crow's nest acting as lookouts in Titanic, and around 11:40 Fleet and...
No, what about these two guys in the crow's nest? There's an important point here you want to make sure you mention. Now the important point is this, is the crew members left their binoculars. They left their binoculars back in Southampton. Now, why is that important to the question? The question is what caused the ship to sink? Again, you have to speak in hypotheticals here. You have to say something like, well, if the crew members in the lookout or in the crow's nest had not forgotten their binoculars, they would have more easily been able to spot the icebergs in front of the ship. So that's another event which caused the ship to sink.
Lee tried to figure out what the haze was, and then they know it was an iceberg when they were about to hit it. The Titanic slowly moved to the port directions, but despite...
Now, why was it difficult for the ship to avoid the iceberg? There's another important point. The ship was traveling at 22.5 knots. If the ship had been traveling slower, it probably would have been able to maybe avoid the iceberg. But the ship was going very fast in a very dangerous time with a lot of icebergs all around the ship. That was not a good decision by the captain or by those people in charge of navigating the ship.
All efforts, the starboard side hit the iceberg, causing train rips in the Titanic's slit. Titanic was doomed.
Yes. Okay. So what do we have here? We have really 4 important events, none of which you really explained in this response. The first important event is, on the night the Titanic sank, the sea was very calm and it was very cold. Why is that important? Because the sea was calm, it would be difficult to see icebergs with no waves breaking at the base of the icebergs. That's an important point, right? Another important point, as I already said, the crew members in the lookout's nest, or the crow's nest, they had misplaced or left their binoculars in Southampton, which means it would be more difficult for them to spot the icebergs. Now, one thing you did say, but you didn't connect it back to the purpose, is the Titanic or the crew members, the wireless operators, ignored repeated ice warnings from the California. Right? That's another important event. Now, the last one, I think, the important event is the ship was traveling at about 22.5 knots per hour, which means that it was going too fast. It was difficult. According to the lecture, the ship would have difficulty kind of avoiding the iceberg because it was traveling pretty quickly. All right, so let's take a look at the rubrics here. On this one, you can't get a very good score. You simply have a very basic, kind of a global understanding of the lecture, but you weren't able to really explain any meaningful points that were relevant to the question, which is, why did this ship sink? And you need a better introduction. You remember how I said in the beginning, you started off with a detail, but that's not a good idea. You want to start off more with a generalization, which restates the question, and that helps. It makes easier for you to organize your ideas. Your score here, I'm going to put you at about 1.83 out of 4, or 14 points out of 30 on this practice test. So for you, you need a little bit better, I think. There's 3 things here. Your vocabulary is limited. Your grammar is limited, as you already know from your 5 perfect sentences that you've been doing in my class. You need to really work on improving your grammar. You need to improve your vocabulary, but you also need to improve your listening comprehension and your note-taking. So for listening comprehension, I got 3 websites for you that are very good. And over the next few months, I recommend that you practice with your note-taking and your listening a lot. Remember, you got a few weeks here before you start your graduate program at Cal State, right? So you got plenty of time to work on these things. So my recommendation is 3 websites: National Public Radio, TED Talks, and Randall's Cyber Listening Lab. In addition to working at those 3 websites on a day-to-day basis, you can also go to the listening section of my online TOEFL course, and you can start doing some of those listening practice tests to continue to monitor and test your listening comprehension. So for me, what it's telling me is when something is academic, which means the lecture is more complicated, the connections aren't as easy to make, this is where you're having trouble. So I think if you do more practice with your listening, if you improve your vocabulary and your grammar, then it stands to reason you should be able to improve your speaking, your academic speaking, at least in this area. Okay, so your score is 1.83 out of 4, 14 points out of 30. So then, if we look at the syllabus, if we go to page 9, 1.83 is going to put you at 65% on this assignment. All right? Anyway, thank you very much.